attend this webinar. We do have a Twitter handle, which is, you can see on the screen hopefully, which is LRNCafe. So LRNCafe, and the hashtag is knowledge management. So if you want to use that, that'll be fantastic. In terms of interaction, it's slightly limited by GoToWebinar, but you do have a Q&A box, which if you want to throw in any questions, please, or even comments, please do put it in there, and we'll share it with the audience, or indeed stop a conversation to ask those questions that you have raised. We also have a chat box which will be sending links. Shreya is already sending links across to you. So that's the interaction that's there. We've got a very, I must say, a panel that I'm very pleased that we've been able to get a panel of this caliber, because I know both Rob and Lynn have worked across both learning and knowledge management. So let me first introduce Lynn. As you can see from the screen, Lynn is a knowledge services design consultant at Bupa, based in Melbourne. Lynn has worked with ANZ, Telstra, and Medibank Private in similar roles across knowledge management and learning. And Lynn is also a lecturer at RMIT in knowledge management. So a really nice mix of learning and knowledge management skills and experience. Lynn, so welcome to the panel.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
No, yeah, we can, Lynn. We can. We also have Rob, who should be joining us in the next 20-25 minutes, because he's going to come from the meeting. So he'll share his slides out towards the end, and we can, we'll introduce you to Rob when he does join us. And there's myself. I've had experience in terms of both learning, as you're aware, but also knowledge management. Flavors throughout my career. So really interested in this topic. I must warn you that I am having a few issues with broadband connectivity. If there is an issue and I get disconnected, fingers crossed I don't, but if I do, then Lynn or Shreya will take over and run the slides. So hopefully we won't be disconnected. So we'll make a start, and as you can see, we've got a lot of people from a lot of organizations attending or registered to attend the webinar. Just a quick note about LearningCafe and Capability Cafe. As if you've attended a webinar before, you would know that we are kind of a community of professionals with a focus on learning and capability, respectively. And we reach the community through webinars like this one. Plus, we've got the Unconference coming up in Sydney on February 23rd. The seats are getting filled, and if you really do want to come to the Unconference, that'll be fantastic. We've got some great facilitators, and this topic that we're discussing today is also included in the Unconference, the theme of which is really fusion. So it is a trend or the expectation that learning becomes more sophisticated by incorporating components of knowledge management, capability management, to actually reflect the complexity in the organization itself and the need for different systems and functions to integrate. So just another slide on what's coming up. So 23rd Feb is the Unconference in Sydney at the Australian Technology Park. We also have the next webinar as part of the Capability Cafe on...
Sorry, excuse me, Jeevan.
Yeah.
It's been, I've still got the Unconference screen.
Right, okay, sure, no problem. Let me just do that. It'll be coming soon. So while I'm refreshing my screen, so let's just look at that. Okay, so right, let me just do that. Okay, so should come up soon. Well, I'll keep talking, and the screen will refresh. We also have the webinar on digital acumen for the workforce, so that should be kind of another interesting one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause and restart it. Okay. All right, so you should kind of get the screen very soon. Lynn, do we have that there? You can see that now.
Yeah, I can see your screen now with your name.
Excellent. All right, fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just get into the meat of the presentation. by sharing some statistics with you, right? So this was the form that you filled in during the registration process, and we have about 92 people, respond to that survey. And hopefully you can see that on the screen. The first question, to the top left is the question was, around, are you involved in building learning or knowledge management or a combination of both? And I was a little surprised because 64% of the respondents said that they were involved in designing learning plus knowledge management solutions, right? So either or a combination. So that was a slightly higher number than I expected. 32% indicated that they did only learning solutions, 3% only knowledge management solutions, and 1% were none of the three options. So glad to have an audience which plays across both sides of the aisle. The other one question was that in your organization, are there plans to integrate learning and knowledge management function? 11% said already done. 32% said doing right now, 10% said in 2 years, and 38% said no plans. And I kind of saw a little discrepancy between, I guess, the two statistics in which 64% have say that they build both KM and learning solutions, but only 43% are integrating the functions. So looks like the solutions are being built, but the functions are still separate. So that's kind of an interesting one to see. Lynn, can I get you in just in terms of the second statistic where only 38% have no plans to integrate learning and knowledge management. I know that you kind of lecture in knowledge management. What's your feel on whether organizations recognize or not only recognize, but maybe evaluate the need to integrate learning and knowledge management?
I think from my experience that knowledge management has often been a solution that was delivered out of operations or out of IT, and so they've been held in those areas, and obviously learning is often a HR function or sometimes an operations function, but yeah, it's where those units are placed inside an organisation which impacts how closely they often work together. So I think that's one of the challenges.
Sure, Lynn, and while we've got that poll open and hopefully you're responding to that poll, the question also is, personally, do you think that knowledge management and learning are quite different professions? Because, I guess learning folks might come from, like a Cert 4 or a degree in HR. And I think people who specialize in KM, could you just give us an overview of how they kind of enter the profession? Is it, for example, like yourself, you've kind of come from learning and then gone into KM, but are there people in the profession who, start with knowledge management and kind of, stay in knowledge management? So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's ultimately we're actually heading for the same goal, and that is changing behaviour for our organisation. So whether it's to change it for delivering new tools or new opportunities, it's all about changing behaviour. I think the challenge or the differences are sometimes learning perhaps maybe it's the introvert-extrovert thing, that learning people are often more extroverted, depending on whether you're a developer or actually a presenter, and KM people can tend to be more systems-based and perhaps technical writing focused and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, there are some of us, like myself, who are happy to get out there and talk about knowledge management. And for me, as I said to you earlier, it's been a progression. I was a trainer, and I learnt a whole lot of stuff when I was travelling around the country training in a particular piece of software, and I picked up all these other tacit learnings along the way, and I was trying to work out how I could share them when they weren't part of the formal learning structure that I was participating in. So that's where my passion for knowledge management came into play.
Thanks, Lynn. And if you can, see the results of why you're attending this webinar, it's kind of a mix of, people in the wanting to discover about this topic, but also, I guess, people who already know about this topic, trying to see if there's a new angle. So it's a nice mix, of both of them. The next slide is again back, to the survey, which should be coming up very soon. Is the question really was around, do people feel that the shorter, smaller types of learning, the micro learning, and the content curation, informal learning, etc. That's quite popular nowadays, is actually kind of is another form of knowledge management, and really they exist only because we haven't integrated two functions. And if they were integrated, then we probably wouldn't have the need to have terms like micro learning, informal learning, and so that was a question that we asked. 72% said partially, right? So at least 72% said that there are some components of this, informal, micro, smaller types of learning that fit into knowledge management. 21%, which is a fairly significant number for the rest, they said that yes, they are knowledge management. So, and 7% said they're quite distinctly different, right? So, Lynn, can I get you in to comment on this statistic? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, microlearning. I think when I read research that says we have less of an attention span than a goldfish, I can see why microlearning is something that's made a very large appearance in the learning community. But part of that is also I think related to organisations making time to learn. We don't always give the people that need the learning the opportunity to do the learning, particularly when they're in perhaps service-oriented organisations that rely on getting the call completed or getting the customer served and all that sort of stuff. So micro-learning has come out of, I guess, the need for us to do it as quickly and as simply as possible. And so, yes, I think they're very interrelated. Yes, we can give them some micro-learning, but also then when can they connect with that micro-learning at a later date if they need to re-look at their skills.
Sure. But Lynn, can I just check with you is, for example, wouldn't the KM folks or the KM department be kind of producing micro-learning in any case? It's just that they probably haven't connected. So it could be, a piece of research that is sent out to people whom it would be relevant to. So it's kind of, do you think it's kind of already happening but just not called micro-learning because it kind of sits in the KM bucket?
Absolutely. We are trying to provide content as succinctly as possible and connecting people at the time that they need that knowledge. So yes, micro-learning is definitely part of KM. Absolutely.
Okay. Alrighty, fantastic. So just on the screen again, on the bottom right hand corner, the question we asked was, do you think the learning and the knowledge management functions, that the departments or can merge? 59% said partially. 35%, which is a fairly nice number, said that it's time to merge. 3% said yes, but it'll never happen. So that's kind of 38% who kind of say yes. And only 3% said no, they are different functions, right? So I think through both the statistics, and it is shown on the screen, is that about 93 to 97% feel that there is at least a partial overlap, if not a complete overlap. And if that number is right, then why do we actually have different functions and different titles, and even like we've got the different conferences, and there doesn't seem to be much fusion of learning and knowledge. This kind of seem to exist in silos. Happily to say that LearningCafe and conference will be one of the first ones, I guess, which has a emphasis on both of them. So Lynn, question to you, and love some questions and comments through the QA box from the audience about if there is so much overlap and if people perceive it to be so, why are there still different functions? Lynn, over to you. And look, we won't hold you to your response, but just your view.
I think it depends on the organisation. As I say, sometimes it's where the functions have sit inside the organisation. But from the many KM conferences that I've attended and from my own experiences, learning and knowledge have worked hand in hand as much as possible, because that there's been an understanding that learning is very important, but we also need to work out how we can access that same information and knowledge and learning at a later date. And it's so I think that, and even from the KM conferences, we just don't talk about knowledge management. We talk about organisational development and change management and all the same things that learning needs to and has looked at as well. So we are a combined function, and as I said, we're trying to achieve the same goals. So, and that is changing behaviours.
Thank you very much. For those people who aren't paying attention, there is a poll on the screen. If you can just quickly respond to that, and we'll move on to the next screen. So there is a poll on the screen for you to respond. Yes, maybe no. So that'll be fantastic. So, okay. So let me just kind of close the poll. 82% have voted. So let me close the poll here and share. The numbers are pretty consistent, with what we had in the survey, which is, basically nobody said that there is no overlap. 39%, 40% said yes, there is. Maybe they should merge. 61% say that they definitely should merge. So, look, I think that's very much in agreement, with I guess my own and Learning Cafe's view about these two functions. I'm going to go into my slides now and really present Learning Cafe or my point of view. The blame is mine alone if there's something wrong there or you don't agree with the view. It's my view, and it's something that I do think, from having maybe about 25 years of experience in the field now, can see that that there is no real reason why the two functions shouldn't merge. But anyway, I guess what you can see on the slide is that KM and learning development folks are both of them are really excited about microlearning, content curation, personalized knowledge, etc., etc. But I think that's they probably wouldn't be that excited if the two functions were merged, right? And because they would see that stuff's already happening in KM, for example, as part of the knowledge management. And that, I guess, is kind of as you can see from the slide, is just the silos, right? So they've kind of grown organically in the silos, and those silos don't really overlap, right? So in a lot of organizations that I've consulted to or talked to L&D folks, there really never has been a strong theme of incorporating knowledge management. So they kind of seem to do in different silos. And that's what's happening is, both I think KM and learning management are wanting to become more nimble, agile, business responsive, shorter knowledge half-line, and all those things that drive them. But they seem to be doing it separately, right? In parallel silos. So they're kind of running in parallel tracks. And my contention is that we seriously need to look at converging, right? And they really should combine for the reasons that are shown on the slide. Number one, it's better employee experience. Now, as we know that employees are really interested in getting knowledge, learning in whatever form works. They're not particularly interested where it's coming from or which department it's coming from. And if you've got a different set of systems, different set of frameworks, governance, it's really two sets of experience for employees when really should be one, right? It'll also reduce inefficiencies, costs, and headcount, so that overlap, when things merge. So there might be some efficiencies to be gained there. But the result of all that happening is probably a more responsive and robust function, right? Combining the both strengths. So where the L&D strength, as Lynn mentioned, is more responsive in terms of understanding the business requirements and reacting pretty quickly, or KM strength of actually sitting back, analyzing, and consolidating the information, right? I think that blend of those skills and those approaches, would be fantastic for a combined function. Lynn, can I get you in for your comments, especially, I guess, in terms of the efficiencies gained from kind of merging the two functions, and if you've got any views?
Yeah, well, I think if we're a merged function and we're working more closely together, then perhaps we're delivering a more rounded learning and knowledge experience. So not only are we giving learning in an appropriate manner for the audience, but then they've got access to ongoing information and knowledge that they can access as required. So of my experience, and it is my experience, that we build beautiful e-learning packages, and some of them are in micro formats, but they're not always easy to access and go back to and check again when you're trying to answer a customer question. So my experience would be that then if we could just build learning that gives enough information, I will talk about this more in my thing about giving the the structure of the learning, the basic structure, and then build more detailed information and knowledge. We're giving a more rounded learning experience and a more rounded learning outcome for our audiences.
Sure. Actually, the good point from Nicholas, from Nick from Fairfax, who, by the way, is also taking a session on Tin Can at the Unconference, a pretty hands-on session, and hence the question. And to be honest, I did think about this, but forgot to put it on the slide. Is the question about XAPI Tin Can, right? The standards that are emerging, which kind of allow you to track and record different types of learning in all sorts of places. Do you think that might be a tool that might help convergence? Or because I think there are some XAPI kind of standards emerging within KM itself. So not knowing too much about kind of KM standards. Lynn, any comments about Tin Can or XAPI or the emerging standards in KM?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know a lot about XAPI and Tin Can, and so directing to that, I couldn't answer that question. Standards and frameworks, KM has got some ISO standards that's come out of project management. So knowledge management has come out of lessons learned, activities and things like that through project management over the years, as well as having lots of theory and frameworks itself. And so they're currently looking at part of the, I think it's the ISO 9000 standards, is they're actually building specific knowledge management standards, and there's actually a community of knowledge management practitioners, many of them Melbourne-based, who are working with the international community to actually further strengthen those knowledge management standards. So no doubt they would be probably very similar about having access to knowledge and information at the time. So, but I don't know a lot about Tin Can, so I really can't talk towards that at this point.
Yeah, no worries. I think this is.
I'll do some Googling.
Yeah, I think this is where it works very well. I know a bit about Tin Can XAPI, about the KM standards, and if you'd only talked before, we would have had a similar view, and there might be, a great deal of overlap. So Nick, hopefully that kind of answers the question. And I do think that, XAPI Tin Can will help the convergence, but I'm not entirely sure it meets the need of the knowledge management, standards. When I used to work for, SCI Global, I had a look at those standards, and I think Tin Can tends to be a little bit more technical, and KM is kind of the KM standards. It'll be there. So Nick, thank you very much for that. Fantastic. Okay, so the next slide is the one that I've put together, and just me, is, how would the combined function look like, right? So you've got three colors in there saying, take the strong bits from KM, take the strong bits from L&D, and, there's the third color, which is kind of both, depending upon who's stronger in that area. What we've said is that because a KM, has a more robust and a sophisticated conceptual foundation, the combined function should be based on KM frameworks and methodology. Again, in terms of the stages: analysis, design, implement. So KM, I'd say, probably tend to be stronger in analysis, right? But in terms of design, it could be both, and implementation probably, because the L&D folks, tend to be more at the coalface, they could, take that on. In terms of, again, the types of learning, the formal learning, L&D is pretty good already, legacy for a long, long time. Structured knowledge, KM has been good for a long time. Informal learning is a space that is kind of new, and both are playing in that space. And I think a combination of both would work really well. And like Lynn pointed out, and this is also just my opinion, in terms of the interface to the business and employee experience, L&D probably have those, skills. Then again, in terms of, evaluation and effectiveness, probably again have both, but kind of lean more on KM simply because they probably have a more robust and sophisticated framework. So again, kind of depends upon the strength of the two functions. But I think if you were to take kind of average function in an average organization, this is what I had in mind. And invite Lynn to either agree or disagree with this. Lynn, your thoughts?
Well, it'd be experiences. So, the coalface, the knowledge teams I've worked in have been very much at the coalface, so sitting in amongst call centre teams and things like that, and from that we've been able to get that immediate feedback on the success and I guess the validity of the content that we've been sharing with them. And in fact, using some of those subject matter experts from those teams to help deliver some of the content that we've got. So whether that's through feedback or through even design in some respects. So they are very much I think the foundational framework does cross both learning and knowledge, and the skills of the people, I guess, is probably what's the most important part here, how we get the strength of all the right people from both learning and knowledge to work together to build the right team.
Thank you, Lynn. So, definitely, something to think about. If, as most people have indicated, that there is an overlap. So, hopefully, they'll act on that. Okay, and I guess this is probably my second last slide before I hand it over to Lynn. Essentially saying that it is time to merge. And the barriers, I think the biggest barrier, especially in the larger organization, is the fact that they work in silos, and there isn't like a strong incentive for people to talk. L&D has a different reporting line to HR. KM sits in, a different, more to business and operations. But a bigger challenge probably is the legacy technology stack. So each function, because I've kind of gone through the digital transformation exercise from classroom to e-learning and KM from libraries to digital content and knowledge, they've kind of built a skill-based mindset around their own technology stacks. And I think that might be one of the bigger barriers. And there aren't too many vendors, at least not that I'm aware of, who are kind of positioning themselves equally across both. They either come from the LMS camp and kind of add on content curation bits, or they come from the KM camp, right, and are tending to add on learning functionality. So that's one barrier, and also the skills and mindsets are different. So maybe different kind of people, as Lynn indicated, but there's no reason why the two functions can't work well together. But Lynn, just a comment on the technology stacks being a possible barrier to kind of merging the functions, because there's just so much invested in those stacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And though I think the technology tools, the newer tools, are actually looking at better ways of combining LMS type technologies with the storage and collaborative opportunities that you find in a lot of knowledge tools these days as well. So I think it's getting better, but the other challenge we've got is the proliferation of social and collaborative tools, which also impact both knowledge and learning systems, I think, as well. So other ways to gain the insights and the information and the learning you need. So lots of challenges inside organisations on how to deliver both learning and then the information and knowledge management post-learning, or as part of learning.
Excellent. Thank you, Lynn. I think we've got Rob online. Rob, you there?
I am, Jeevan.
All right, man. So yeah, thanks for coming, joining, and I don't know how much of the presentation you've already had a look at, but what are your views in terms of the the merging of the functions and the possible barriers between the two functions? If in the first case you do think that there is a strong case for merging the two functions.
I think, yeah, look, for me, whether we like it or not, I think the functions are merging, but it will be very much learner driven. And the reason why I say that is that typically what you've got to focus on is that information seeking behaviour within organisations itself, and the way that people actually organise knowledge around their own behaviour often lends itself to the way that they actually establish trusted nodes out on their network, and how they actually go out to that network to actually find out information, and in the same process, due process, learn, but whether they're applying that within their work context or whether they're applying it anywhere else. So I think what organisations have got to do is realise that a lot can actually be attributed to the learner themselves and their information-seeking behaviour and what they're able to actually utilise and then apply in their work context and their work situations. I think the biggest barrier to looking at the way that these two fit together is to actually understand the distinct purposes behind it. You know, looking at Lynn's stuff and understanding that from a pure KM perspective, and certainly within my new role, is actually understanding what the two facilitate and actually can do in terms of value add, and doing that from the perspective of making sure that people understand what it is each of them can do for the organisation. That once that's actually understood, then we start to unearth the layers of human performance technology and a whole range of other things that fit into the schema. But I think most of it right now is being learner or information seeker driven.
Thanks, Rob, and I think that's a fair comment, because I guess the learners don't really care where the information comes from. They just want it in the shape and form that's best is best used for them. So, you know, thanks for the comment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to Lynn. Lynn, we'll just skip through the statements. Oh, sorry, just before I go, just want to share with you the next-gen L&D capability framework for those who haven't seen it. The first slide really kind of shows the traditional framework, where we've got the business partnership, project management, and the ADDIE methodology. But the next one is the LearningCafe next-gen framework, and we're happy to send out the details or link to this framework, where we say that it's a T-shaped skill base, so it's broad and also deep. But the new components or the new skills required include agile design thinking, but also knowledge management. So we think that it's a key part of the new skill set for L&D, and this pretty much forms the foundation for the LearningCafe conference in Sydney later this month. So just the last slide is look, if you want to do more than just hear people talk about merging KM and learning, and if you want to think a little bit more or take some action, I would recommend that you join Ideas at Work. We're going to run a specific project on merging KM and learning, so we're going to discuss is it feasible, if it is feasible, how to do it, etc. All kind of done virtually, and fairly flexible in terms of how much you want to participate. Please do go to the website, which is ideasatwork.com.au/contact, and just register there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lynn, and Lynn, over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. So I also lecture at RMIT at the postgraduate level of business IT in knowledge management, and so I can talk about knowledge management for hours and hours and hours, but I've only got 15 minutes, so I'll try and be as succinct as possible. I'm currently on a project at Bupa, and having great fun here, but it's only been a few weeks, and I've met some awesome people and some great teams, but I'm trying to convince you that I don't take risks. I'm not sure that the pictures here actually share that same, there's no evidence to the same. But I've been in knowledge management for about 10 years. Sorry, the orange sheet, I managed to spend some, I guess I'm a global operator, I managed to spend 3 weeks in India working with my knowledge team that were based in India at point in there. So I had visited some temples and I had to wear a beautiful orange frock. So I come from a training and learning background. I come and then moved into knowledge management. I think I'm a sharer and I'm passionate about sharing with people. So and I've got a pretty diverse skill set, as you can see. I was once a fitter and turner as well. So I am a bit of a geek. I'll have to acknowledge that as well. Next screen, please, Stephen. All right. I'll try not to bore you too much. I wanted to show you there is lots of different frameworks around knowledge management and how people share knowledge, and this is one of them. This is the SECI cycle, which has been around, as you can see, since 1995 and perhaps earlier, and that basically knowledge is created, according to Nanaka, it's created when tacit and explicit knowledge interact. Tacit being internal, explicit being external, if you don't know that. And I'm trying not to be too theoretical here. But what I'm trying to share with you is that both learning and knowledge are in this cycle, and that often what we're doing with learning is we're trying to make explicit information tacit, so we're trying to move it from being external into internal, making explicit to tacit, and that knowledge management or knowledge sharing is potentially gathering what is tacit and trying to make it explicit, codifying it or write it down. So a very short introduction to one of many KM frameworks that you could possibly find. To simplify that maybe a little bit easier, or I've got a couple of other thoughts on that. Next slide. I like to talk about the yin and yang of knowledge and learning. So next slide, please. Thank you. Explicit knowledge, as I say, we're pushing that out through the learning mechanisms. We're trying to make it tacit, so we're trying to embed that knowledge into our learners' heads. They're making it tacit, so it's internalized, and they can just do it off by heart. And then with knowledge management and knowledge seeking, what we're doing is then looking for that tacit knowledge to be delivered from out of the organisations and out of our audiences' heads and making that explicit. So we're pulling the tacit knowledge out and making it explicit. So a bit of a yin and yang. And then for your amusement, my similar sort of related theory, next slide please, Jeevan, is that learning is the skeleton. It gives you the structure or the frameworks of what you need to deliver, and that knowledge management is the muscle, the meat that we then build on the skeleton is another metaphor that I could use in there. So,
and Lynn, like a good knowledge management professional, you've given the references too for the image, so well done.
Absolutely, yeah, I do my best to do that. Also from doing a master's, I know that I need to reference all my work, otherwise and my students who I mark, I also have to make sure they reference as well. So yeah. So for me, they are very much aligned and work together, and that is my history in there. So I also like to throw out this relevant data around why knowledge management and knowledge systems are required, and that is because statistically through the research we spend about a fifth of our time in the workplace looking for the answers to our questions. 28 hours a week writing emails, trying to connect with the right people, searching for information according to McKinsey, and Interact has also done something very similar. 20% of our business time is looking. We're looking for the information needed to do our tasks. We're searching in knowledge systems to answer the customer's questions. We're trying to find a person who's an expert in a particular work practice or method. And so given that we're wasting so much time looking for stuff, we need to make sure that we're delivering and building these knowledge or information systems better to help prevent that.
And Lynn, can I just interrupt to ask, that while I think, through the use of, digital technologies and, our smartphone, we've become much more efficient in terms of searching knowledge, and thanks Google. But at the same time, the knowledge also has kind of exploded. So the time you end up spending is about the same, even though it's kind of become more efficient. The volume has increased. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think people are willing to go and search themselves, but the way historically the way we've been building our learning and our knowledge systems has not necessarily been to the best of our, I guess, suitable to all the end users. I guess we're looking at structures we're building them in structures that suit a routine and a management theory of go and do as I say, whereas now people are a bit more rounded in their knowledge and have a million different ways that they can solve a problem, and so perhaps they're wasting time on finding different solutions. Perhaps there's that. I also, a personal insight that I have that I find really interesting is that in organisations, we're willing to Google to answer how to build a barbecue or how to sew up our pants or all that knowledge that we need to seek externally, but inside an organisation we seem to have a requirement that our organisation must provide us with our learning and training needs, and not sort of sometimes willing to go and find that ourselves. But that's an insight that I have, so I haven't gotten any research or proof that is the way. That just seems to be that people demand training when they're in the workplace without going to find it themselves. So that's the other challenge with learning and knowledge management, I think, both of those. And I'm happy for people to disagree with me, but that's my insight. Okay, all right, so let's talk about some experience. I I've worked in a call centre organisation where the training that was provided had a cost back in a few years ago now of $12,500 for this 3-month training activity that they went through, and they were having a 30% turnover rate. So it was a large expense to go through the learning process, and they weren't keeping all of their staff. There's a significant amount of turnover in there. They also had a significant help desk, an internal help desk to help internal staff that was managed by 12 people. They had high call handling times, and they were making a lot of what's called ex gratia payments, but refunds to customers or payments to customers who'd been given incorrect information out of the learning and knowledge systems at that time. There was a multiple amount of knowledge opportunities to find information, but there was no consistent or trusted place to find those information. So what I found was with the learning environments is that content for learning was often only updated when there was a budget for it, rather than it being a formal part of the learning process where things were updated frequently or managed on a day-to-day basis. Whereas with knowledge services team, the idea of having a knowledge team was to then have content that could be audited frequently, be up to date, be credible and trusted. So it was how we merged those two things together, or built those things together. Yes, we needed the training, and we needed to have a significant training because it was a complex organisation. We needed to have significant training, but then how can we put or collate some of that training inside the knowledge system so that it could be updated on a more frequent basis? And by having this trusted and credible knowledge source, did we then need to have internal staff help desks where the knowledge was available for access at any time. So we could be able to reduce that staff cost down by half. When we built the knowledge tool in place, we're able to demonstrate a reduction in call handling time, and there was also constant feedback available. So if you saw some content in the knowledge system, you could send some feedback, and it was actioned and it was transparent, and by the user providing, or the learner providing their feedback, they were gaining some buy-in from the knowledge in there. So if we can look at how we can get learning to work together with knowledge to build that, I guess, ongoing connection so that content is up to date and able to be updated more frequently, whether it is the learning element or whether it's just the knowledge element. My experience has found that we're able to use knowledge systems to improve the learning situation inside the organisation. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Lynn, I've actually just got a comment, and I don't know if you remember that, maybe about 8 years back, LCMS, Learning Content Management System, was gaining popularity, and I know that when Rob was at St. George, they had, tried to use the LCMS, but looks like, and some, because it died out because I'm not sure for, there are lots of reasons why that happened. But looks like with this, smaller chunking of knowledge, there's almost like a need to kind of relook at what LCMS, the potential of LCMS, and maybe it's become a little bit more, efficient now. So Rob, any views on, the good old days of, LCMS, and do you think it's time for it to come back?
It's a really, really good question, Jeevan. I don't know. I say that quite consistently because not only do you have learning content management systems, but you've got Adobe and massive companies with content management systems, Squiz Matrix, and a lot of others. These content management systems themselves are now trying to make sense, if you like, of the content management stratosphere. And when you think of the amount of information and knowledge that's actually produced on a daily basis, it's
I think, Rob, you're there. I think we might have lost you. Lynn, you're there? Yep. Lynn, why don't you continue? When Rob comes back, we'll continue with his comment.
All right, cool. Yeah. And I guess aligned with this, and I certainly don't want to anyone to feel like I'm dismissing learning at all, because I'm trying not to. I think they work very well together. As I say, hand in hand, we're about changing behaviour. We're looking at how we can just better deliver that in working together, because I've come from a training and learning background. I understand the value of it and how we can do it. For me, it was just then my focus is now is on the post-training activities and how we support our audiences ongoing. So what I did, just adding into that content curation, it's basically learning and knowledge management. The content curation elements are about how we make how do we find the content we need and how do we access it frequently and all that sort of, how do we make sure that it is credible and trusted and up to date and all that sort of stuff. So content curation is very much a key part of both learning and knowledge management as well, as making sure that it's trusted content that we're looking at. All right, if we want to go quickly, because I'm probably pushing my time limits, to my second example, my other challenge here was I was working for a global organisation that was based across 28 countries, and that we provided training on our tool sets to subject matter experts in each country, who then push the training out inside their own internal organisation, and that our knowledge system was actually, the challenge was our knowledge system was sold as a sort of matching type tool, so people didn't know about the value of the content in there because they thought they were looking for it to match information to the end user, and it was a real challenge in there. So our messaging around where learning and knowledge sits together is that we need to be very clear about where they sit and how they work well together, because otherwise in the end we'll have challenges of where a knowledge system does not support learning and it does not help our audiences at all, because we've made this complex piece and sold it incorrectly to our end users, and they can't find what they need and they can't trust it as well. And so if they don't trust the knowledge system, there's a potential they don't trust any of the information that comes out of the organisation as well. So that was just I'm happy to talk to anyone about more detail about this one, but yeah, being that we're not sending out the right messages, then we're not getting our learning and our knowledge shared in the right place. So, that was just I just wanted to throw that in there as a knowledge management specific example that I've experienced as well. So that's me, and my credits everywhere. So I'll probably all my
Excellent.
References and credits.
Fantastic. Wrong time to stop because Rob's still offline. So I think, Shay, if you want to send an email to Rob asking him to join through the telephone, so hopefully he'll come online. I know he's got his slides, but let me see if I can at least walk through his slides. How about Lynn? You and I try to figure out what the slides say.
Before we move on.
Sure.
Yeah, just before you move on though, someone also asked about analytics used in KM.
Yep.
In the question, and so I guess, and we sort of talked about before about there's the immediacy of feedback in learning by completing a questionnaire at the end of the learning task, which we don't get with the same immediacy with knowledge systems. However, there are usually in those knowledge-based systems feedback opportunities and transparency opportunities. So I can, is the information you see on the screen correct? Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or some actual written feedback to our content. And it's the same. You can change with the immediacy of the learning feedback. Yes, you could potentially change your learning delivery, but that impact is on the next course and not to those same learners that you've just delivered the learning to, whereas with knowledge management we can actually, whilst it's not quite as immediate, the feedback, we can deliver a change to the knowledge or the information that we've got in our knowledge system and show to the user that it's been updated to reflect their feedback. So, and so analytics that we're using is updates to content. We might measure how many people are viewing content. We might measure the amount of feedback we're getting or including the lack of views inside the content. So if people aren't looking at the content, if they stop looking at it, only one or two filtering through, then we know that content's not adding any value as well. So those are the kind of analytics that we tend to use inside KM to show the value of the content that we've got there.
No worries. Thanks, Lynn. So let's walk through Rob's slide because I know that he's got some again conceptual content, so we can walk through that, and I'm sure Rob will join in soon. But again, I'll talk to this one because I can talk to it. So I guess what we're talking about really here is we talked about the formal and the structuredness of knowledge, and here's what you see on the slide. Really kind of variations of or shades of along this axis. So, where we had the structured formal learning, which L&D has typically played in, and the unstructured is where there is growth for a profession, but also need in the business, which, as you point out in the yin and yang, I think just to relate to what you said, Lynn, is that it's it is a new field for L&D people, but that's where the growth is. So I think what the slide shows is all the terms that we hear around organizational learning and how they kind of fit into this axis, and we need to kind of more move towards the right hand side, towards the engineered and collaborative part of the continuum. So I think this one, Lynn, do you want to talk to this to this slide?
Sure. For me, I don't know what context Rob was using this is, but this is social value mapping as far as I understand it, and this is showing our connections. Yep. And so showing our connections inside an organisation and where we get our knowledge and our learning from. And so in many organisations you'll find that your information, a lot of it you gain within your own little peer groups, but in fact it's the let's call them the water cooler conversations that triggers new ideas and new thought processes and new learning and new information that you might not otherwise get inside your own little community in there. So your networks play very much a formative part of providing your knowledge and learning and collaboration opportunities.
So Lynn, can I just ask you a question, because these knowledge networks before everything became digital did exist in organizations? So that was your water cooler talk, or just having a cup of coffee, etc. And kind of what's happened is that that networks kind of moved digital, right? And but I guess what L&D are saying is that maybe we can use those networks, and they call it social learning, right, to leverage that, right? And it's almost like it's a very structured network, structured network foundation. But I'm just thinking, a question to you is that, given the nature of networks, which are kind of organic and they grow and fall according to the demand, and there's certain dynamics, is the forced dynamics by kind of setting collaborative basically L&D kind of saying, look, we're going to use this and provide more structure and expect that network to work efficiently, and a lot of the time it actually doesn't, so because people don't turn up. What are your views on that, if you get the hang of my question?
Yeah, so other research I could have thrown in there was about the percentage of people who participate in collaborative and social communities, which I've got a good little ladder that I've picked up. If anyone's ever read the Groundswell book, it talks about, it's a marketing sort of focus, but it actually talks about how we collaborate, and Australia's pretty good at it on mine as well. So the idea is that we collaborate and we participate in things that connect with us emotionally. So the topic doesn't always, is not always important to us. So when we think that there's not enough people collaborating in a digital online community, it's not necessarily because they don't care. It's just because the topic is not the one that they're emotionally connected to. But once the topic does become that connection, then you'll see that they participate. So we've got to be okay and be happy with the people who lurk and don't participate in these type of activities.
And then I guess what I guess I completely agree with you, and love to hear from the audience, from the Q&A panel. But I guess what you're saying is that emotional connection is to the content is important, and in reality, in work, you don't have to, the opportunities to emotionally connect with content that comes out of the workplace, they're far and few between, and that's why it is probably not, the networks are not as strong and active as they are in personal life, where you kind of react to a picture on Facebook.
Yeah, I guess, no, there's still plenty of things that frustrate us in work, so that would make us feel emotionally connected to not enjoying it, I guess, and that also then delivers a need to change behaviour or change outcomes.
So, so when you say emotion, is it both positive and negative emotion? So if you get the workforce frustrated, they actually
Absolutely.
might, okay, all right, there you go. So no point, maybe if making them happy doesn't work, maybe, rile them up and they'll participate.
Well, it's not about making them unhappy. It's about understanding what makes them. Yeah. Or what's understanding about what makes them unhappy, so that we can change what that is. So listening to our people, all that sort of stuff. So, important stuff. Yep.
So Rob's next slide. Stop calling it learning. And the slide says that today's work basically say continuous learning. Half-life of knowledge is changing all the time, and you kind of learn. You want to learn in the size and the time that you have, right? So so I guess it's in terms of work and learning are so enmeshed, and they are happening so day to day, pretty much every hour or every half an hour, because the nature of work is changing, and like we said, the half-life of knowledge is decreasing. So more a need to do that. And well, information behavior isn't changing, it's merely accelerating. Now I won't go into this seems pretty complicated. Lynn, do you have any views on this one, or should we skip this one?
Well, I guess part of it is, it's that emotional stuff and having our information available to us at the right time, at the right place, and all that sort of stuff. So, let's not go into too much detail at the end of the
Absolutely. And look, I think the next slide really is about asking the critical question whether training is the solution. So Rob and I have talked in the past, is that a lot of time learning is given orders saying, hey, can you just build a course? And sometimes you just take the orders because, well, they hold the budget strings, and that's is what has been told. But a lot of times I think it's kind of going back and trying to understand if training is the solution, or there are other forms or indeed other solutions that are more appropriate. So just a question to you, Lynn, before we kind of close off quickly in the next couple of minutes, is in terms of training, we've got training needs analysis, and in theory that works from a combination of the individual training needs analysis done during performance appraisal, and that's kind of collated, and that becomes a big database of training. I see that happening less and less nowadays. Plus the the capability requirements from the business, so you kind of mix them up and you kind of get a picture of what's required for the training calendar or the training outputs for the next 12 months. How does it work in knowledge management? Do you also kind of do an organizational KM audit of what the organization requires in terms of knowledge and knowledge capture? Rob's back, by the way. Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and usually...
Yep.
Okay.
That's all right. Rob, you there? He's self-muted, but if you want to talk to the slide. Lynn, you go until Rob joins.
Okay, I was going to say, absolutely. Knowledge audits are about understanding what information and knowledge is contained in an organisation, and then we need to, I guess, work with the capability leaders to understand what are the future plans and intent of the organisation, and what knowledge and information needs to be shared across the organisation, so that we can make sure that the knowledge activities align with the learning activities required. There's definitely still a need for learning, using your trusted guides to deliver and share their information and knowledge with you, and then I guess it's learn by doing, or as well as learn by doing, learn by seeing and learn by doing, sorry. And so our knowledge activities should align with that, most definitely. And so in many organisations, trying to be part of the strategic planning and project planning of the organisation is very important.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Rob, if you're there, if you want to unmute yourself, if you've got a chance to, maybe give some closing comments. Let's see if Rob comes through. Okay, probably not. Still having a few issues. I can see him online, but you can't. Look, I think this is where we finish. So it's been kind of a two-way conversation for most time. Apologies on behalf of Rob and behalf of Learning Cafe due to the technology issues. But hopefully the webinar has been informative. If nothing else, hopefully kind of open up another window for you to think about, and if there is, as a lot of you agree that there's actually a lot of overlap, so doesn't it just make logical sense to capitalize on this overlap by combining the functions? So Lynn and Rob, thanks once again for participating in this webinar. Audience, thank you very much for your very precious time around lunchtime. So thanks a lot, and we hope to see you at the unconference or the next webinar on digital capability for the workforce. And this is where we finish. Thanks, Lynn, and thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Jim.